another episode of Build in El Salvador. Today's a special one. We got two legends in the house. Luke Mikic, is that right?
Más o menos.
Yeah. And Eric V. Stacks in the house.
Yo.
All right. And we're just going to rip, man. We're just going to have a good time and talk about what's on our mind. So let's start it off with, why are we here in El Salvador? What brought you here, Eric?
Bright orange future.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, freedom, sovereignty. You guys, obviously. Yeah, I'm grateful to have met. Actually, I met all three of you for the first time at the halving party. I've had a one-sided friendship with you for a while. Been watching your content. You didn't know I existed, but yeah, now we're all here together.
Were you at the halving party, Luke?
I was, and I have been stalking your content for quite some time, Mr. Eric V. Stacks. Don't you worry about that.
It's the greenhouse vibes.
There you go.
Yeah.
You guys can keep the mic a little closer to your mouths, about a fist away, as Joe Rogan would say.
All right, cool. Yeah, man. It's been an awesome weekend. We had Eric here for the Build in El Salvador retreat, our inaugural retreat, and Luke as well. We had Max Kaiser and Stacy Herbert, and we all gave a little talk on stage. It was awesome, man. It was a dream come true, really, for me. And yeah, just super stoked to have you here. You've been great. Everybody has been loving your company, Eric, as far as like just the Bitcoin knowledge that you have been dropping on people. I think you've been orange pilling everyone, just pulling them a little bit more towards the light, you know, nudging them there. And yeah, what's that been like? Talking to you've been talking to all types of people, right? Like just not Bitcoiners, but also you know, people who are just coming into it, trying to understand, wrap their head around it. What's that been like talking to them?
Yeah, so for me, I actually hadn't met a Bitcoiner in person until I went to Pacific Bitcoin last year in October. I was living my quiet little life in Humboldt County, growing weed, stacking sats, savage psychopath Bitcoin maximalist, running around yelling at the same 20 people for the last like few years about Bitcoin. And I finally just was like, I went to my wife, I'm like, I'm going fucking nuts. Like, I need to get out of town. I need to go to this conference, meet some people. And I was chatting with Matt Cratter when I was there, and he's like, hey, you should make some content. Like, you know, you're an interesting individual. You got some interesting stories. And so when I got back from Pacific Bitcoin, the conflict in the Middle East broke out. And I'm looking at my daughter, and I'm like, dang, I got to do something. So I'll just start making some rips, put them on Twitter, see what happens. And opportunities to travel, go speak at conferences, podcast appearances came. And so I've been talking with a lot of people for the last 12 months. Like I went from knowing no Bitcoiners to like knowing an enormous amount of Bitcoiners. Yeah, and I think it's just the optimism. Like I'm exuding fucking gratitude. Like I don't think I could be more grateful for what's happening in the world today through the lens and through as a result of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Dude, it changes everything. It's imposing a new rule set on our civilization. It's forcing cooperation. And it doesn't matter all the shitty people and all the nasty stuff that's happening in the world. That's the thing that's happening. It's a result of people's innate desire, or some people's innate desire to serve their, or ability to serve their self-interest at any expense. And that very thing is what makes Bitcoin work. So I'm pumped. I'm like perpetually optimistic. Couldn't be happier about it. And like, I think that's what people pick up on when they talk with me. If they like what I have to say, it's that optimism. Dude, fucking beyond ecstatic.
I think there was something really cool about our retreat because it was for sovereign-minded people, and there were definitely like Bitcoiners there, or perhaps more amateur Bitcoiners. And so they all had questions, and we had talked about them a little bit. But then that last afternoon, we had it turned into an impromptu workshop because Eric was spitting knowledge about Bitcoin. And then like more and more people came to sit down and listen, more and more people. And so eventually I just gave him a microphone. But I thought it was awesome because
he drew a crowd.
Yeah, he drew a crowd literally at the retreat. And I thought that was so awesome because so many of us that are like super into Bitcoin just listen to this shit all the time, or listen to like you talk all the time. But these people like have never been exposed to that. They just have a very like basic knowledge of Bitcoin. And then just by hanging out with Eric Stacks, suddenly they're looking at everything from a brand new light.
Dude, I forget that not everybody has listened to the Sailor series 3 or 4 times and listened to like 10,000 hours of Bitcoin podcasts.
Yeah.
Like in the last 6 years, I don't even listen to music. There's too
Right.
much important conversations taking place.
Yeah,
like I need
right.
to know what's happening. Like it's like an insatiable need to like learn more about Bitcoin. So,
Well, listening to Bitcoin podcasts is probably easier tending your weed fields as opposed to doing, I don't know, like what if I'm writing or editing video or something like that. I have to like, if it's music or nothing.
yeah, I've had the privilege of being able to spend many years with just my headphones in, working in the garden.
Learning.
Yes. Just devouring optimism.
You know, it's also the fact that here in El Salvador, they're coming out of a dark age, right? A dark period of time, civil war and gang violence. And so all of a sudden, Bukele comes in, cleans up shop. People are liberated. They're hopeful. They're optimistic about life. On top of that, you have the Bitcoin element. So it's like an overlapping optimism over here where it's like, it's just energy feeding energy. And I think that also had a lot to do with it, where people were open and receptive. There was a couple there that they weren't really into Bitcoin, but just because they were around everyone that was so hopeful and optimistic, they were like, man, there's something to this. And when I go back home, I'm going to be like, you know, probably listening to the Sailor series, you know?
Yeah.
She told me that too. She's like, we came for this, but actually we learned a lot about Bitcoin and we're actually pretty stoked about that.
Yeah.
It's all comes back to sovereignty. It's like to answer your question that you started the podcast with, what brought you to El Salvador? For me, I had all the financial sovereignty in the world in Australia. I thought, I'm golden. I've got fuck you money. The state can't touch me. The state can't tax me. I'm just gonna live here on the Gold Coast and in my little van and enjoy the beach for the rest of my life. And then 2020 happened, and I was like, oh shit, my fuck you money is worth absolutely nothing if I don't have other forms of sovereignty in my life. And I think this is where the whole discussion about El Salvador comes into it. El Salvador was one of the few countries that opened up very earlier than most other countries around the world, and said, yeah, you know what? We may not just be the biggest fans of, what has happened over the past couple of years, and we're going to actually change our stance. We're going to now advocate for natural medicines. I'm going to be really careful what I say here so we don't get booted off all the different platforms. But El Salvador made a flip, and they said, you don't require any tests to come into the country. We're going to give you sovereignty and autonomy over your body. So that has brought not only a lot of Bitcoiners who have financial sovereignty to come to El Salvador, but it also brought some other nomads. A lot of surfers are here in El Salvador that have never heard about Bitcoin. And they come here and they're like, hang on, there's a lot of really cool surfers here in El Salvador who seem to be not just really cool guys, but they're also interested in this other form of sovereignty, financial sovereignty. And eventually you're just going to see this merging where you see people who are interested in financial sovereignty start mixing with these people who are interested in geographical sovereignty. Mexico's another little hub spot for this. There's a lot of, you can get a lot of personal sovereignty in Mexico. They leave you alone. The borders were open the whole time throughout 2020 and 2021. And there's also a lot of Bitcoin adoption there. I don't think that's a coincidence. I just think this is a natural way of how this Renaissance 2.0 is going to happen.
I really liked what you were saying at our launch party about how, like you said, financial, geographical, and you also mentioned entrepreneurial sovereignty and how important that was, because you gained your financial sovereignty with Bitcoin. And then did you start your creator journey before or after the 2020 shenanigans with the governments?
Yeah, so it was actually after I realized the importance of geographical sovereignty. So again, a high level for people to try to simplify all of this. The whole thesis of my new book that I'm writing right now is the digital renaissance man is exploiting the 3 exponential trends in the world today. So we're seeing an exponential trend of people wanting financial sovereignty with Bitcoin. Tens of millions of users have adopted Bitcoin in the past 15 years. It's an exponential trend. I think it's close to hitting that steep part on the S-curve. So that's one aspect of sovereignty, financial sovereignty. Then you've got geographical sovereignty. So digital nomads right now is one of the fastest growing trends in the world. 6 years ago in 2018, there was 4 million digital nomads. Today there's 35 million digital nomads.
Really?
People are saying, I want geographical sovereignty. The third exponential trend going exponential today is people quitting the 9 to 5 and creating a business. So I'm looking for a better word. Maybe we can brainstorm a better word for entrepreneurial sovereignty. But that's what I've got right now.
Well, yeah, like my program's called Creator Sovereignty.
Mm.
You become a creator. You create content, you monetize it in some way, shape, or form. Solopreneur is another term that goes around. But we were talking about that today. Like being a solopreneur is depressing.
Yeah, one of the coolest aspects of what's happened here is the fact that we all live on the same street and we're all building together. And like the synergy that's created over there has allowed us to create something that we wouldn't have been able to do on our own. And when you're a solopreneur, it also can get lonely and you're limited. So, I think the next wave is these, sovereign-minded individuals connecting with one another through digital means, through the connectivity of the internet, and then realizing, hey, like there's something here, we can build something together. Let's link up in the real world and let's do something. And so I think that people think of sovereignty as kind of like independence, almost like self-reliance, but I think that human beings really do better when we're building off each other. And so I think that's the next wave of sovereignty, is this like conscious these conscious alliances forming in order to create something that's grander than ourselves.
Which is funny because it's almost like a return to our roots as humans, like tribal and community oriented.
Exactly. But here's the magical thing about the internet and the digital age and the sovereign individual renaissance we're living through today. If we wanted to go back to our community and our roots 200 years ago, and if we wanted to try to find a community or people with the same values as us, we were limited because of our transportation. We didn't have any internet. We didn't have any telecommunications. If we wanted to learn from someone, the smartest person on building businesses, we could only reach out to our network in our physical locality. So we needed to find the best person on business within a 20-kilometer locality. Now with the internet, we can not only listen to somebody who could be the best business entrepreneur in India, Nigeria, America, California. They could be anywhere around the world. We could not only listen to them, we could get on a video call with them. Or even better yet, we could take our fuck you money, get on a plane and go and see them in a 5-hour plane trip. So I think this is like the magic of, this digital renaissance we're living through.
It's the dematerialization, the rate in which our innovation and our ability to communicate and pass information and now pass value is really accelerating how much things are happening. And I think that's a testament to also what's happening in El Salvador. And things are getting better here. Clearly, there's like this beacon of hope and opportunity, and there's property rights and free speech and all this stuff. And so people are pumped. Everyone's excited. Hey, what's going on? I have people asking me all the time, like, what's it like down there? Is it for real? And everybody in the States is worried, like, oh, dude, things are getting bad. How bad is it going to get? It's like, how good is it going to get in El Salvador? How bad is it going to get everywhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the narrative. Like, how shitty is it going to be? Which politician is going to get into office? Everyone's divided in the States over what person is going to get elected to allocate the stolen resources. It's like, could you guys pay attention to the fact that they're robbing you to fund things that otherwise you wouldn't want to fund? Like, they're misallocating capital. It's destroying the culture. And the exact opposite thing is happening here.
And then, sorry, well, I was just gonna say, and I'm changing the subject a little tiny bit, and then meanwhile, the people down here in El Salvador, especially if they live here but they come from Venezuela or they come from other countries, they're concerned like, oh, what's gonna happen here? Like, we're on the same path we've seen in Cuba and other places where everything was great in the beginning, but then later that happened. And then meanwhile, we all come into Bitcoiners like, yeah, freedom, here we are. It's like, it's a really interesting like fork in the road in history of where things might go.
For me, it's a breath of fresh air, dude. I haven't paid attention to the clown show happening in the U.S. like hardly throughout this whole time I've been here. We've been so busy building and working towards something brighter and better than what's going on over there that I just haven't even paid attention. And I can't tell you how like liberated I feel because of that oppressive force over there in clown world. Just literally robbing and sucking the life force out of you, just not only through the money but also through your spirit, and over here you really feel like sky's the limit as far as what opportunities lie, and so you're just invigorated to like create and do things here.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about what's happening here in El Salvador. Two things. I think the first thing is your brain is as good as what you put into it. So you're going to get shitty outputs if you're being propagandized with shitty political clown world nonsense and you're going to have to go to the grocery store. And I used to get so frustrated being chased around the grocery store by masked Nazis trying to make me put a face diaper on my face. I'm not doing that. I don't believe in this nonsense. So the first thing is, it's incredible that the internet allows us to find our tribe and move to a nation state that actually treats us like a normal citizen that is, based on economic reality. And then to go back to Eric's point about, what's happening in El Salvador and it coming out of this dark age or this fourth turning crisis era before the rest of the world, I think everybody's looking for a political solution. The world is full of problem identifiers. Oh, the world is fucked. Oh, there's problems left and right, but nobody knows what's the solution is. Everybody says, oh, we need to vote in Orange Man or Crazy Lady. It's one of the two, or Sleepy Joe. We need to get Sleepy Joe back in. People think all the problems are political problems. They're not political problems. They're monetary problems. And that goes back to what you said a minute ago, Eric. El Salvador has aligned its base layer on economic reality. And they've said, okay, we're not going to steal from our citizens. That's the problem.
Yeah.
The problem everyone feels in the world is, hang on a minute, 60% of my wealth just seems to be evaporating every single year, whether that be 30 to 40% through taxes, 10 to 20% through inflation, and all of the other nonsense you have to pay for. In El Salvador, you can make the decision. Again, not everyone in El Salvador is living on a Bitcoin standard, but you now have the decision to use a money where the government is openly saying, I will not steal your money. Like, do you know how big that is?
But did they still collect taxes?
Yeah, but not so, because it's legal tender, they don't collect taxes on the capital gains that you accumulate with Bitcoin.
And they're not stealing money through inflation.
Right. And
but
here,
is taxation not theft?
Taxation is
it's
theft.
weird. That's always a sticky subject when we talk about El Salvador, right?
See, but
it's
if you
the land of milk and honey.
If you can leave the jurisdiction that you're in, you essentially can go to whatever service provider is going to provide you the services. You're going to have to pay an expense. So I look at taxes like that. But it's consensual if, like, hey, I live in this jurisdiction. These are the fees that I need to contribute. This is the amount of money that I need to contribute to the pot so that the elected officials can allocate those resources to keep the infrastructure good. And if I don't like what they have to offer, then I can up and go somewhere else.
Because I want to see it thrive.
Yeah.
And I believe in these politicians or whoever's in leadership positions that they will help it thrive. And then I'm stoked to pay taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for all my life, I was like, wow, my tax money goes to war.
Yeah.
Like, why am I paying this? I'm just being robbed to fund all this bullshit.
Yeah, but you want to pay for schools and roads and clean water and stuff like that.
And just to know that my tax money in El Salvador could go towards making people's lives better. Like, why is that such a fucking crazy concept in my head? Because of how I've been conditioned for all these years in the United States.
Yeah.
yeah, where we're so disconnected from, the whole tax system, right? We don't even see where that money goes. It doesn't feel like it goes anywhere productive. The infrastructure there is crumbling instead of being built up. And if you look around here, everything's being built up. Roads are being built every day. They're expanding the infrastructure. They're putting new electricity lines. So it's like
more and more super selectos.
Yeah. That is true as well. Like, I want to really double down on that point. I've been back and forwards to El Salvador maybe 5 or 6 times now. Been coming here since early 2022. I think I've been to maybe 20 or 30 other countries in the past 2.5 years.
wow.
El Salvador is easily the one country where you can see a noticeable change. Again, I do believe tax is theft, but I believe the government of El Salvador is the best government at allocating resources right now. Out of any of the other countries around the world, if I were to pay taxes, and again, I'm a tax-paying, law-abiding citizen, but if I were to be paying taxes, I would be pretty happy paying them in El Salvador. And that goes back to your point, Eric. You get to choose which service provider you want to support.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and it's interesting because, like here, the average anyone can go to the hospital and get treated for free, right? Like, that healthcare exists here. That is something that makes me feel good about paying taxes, right? Because I know people that maybe couldn't afford it otherwise can go get healthcare
without coming out with like $50,000 in debt, right?
Yeah, or like it ruins their whole life.
Yeah.
It's like, so there's certain things which makes you like, all right, maybe I don't consider myself a statist. Like, maybe I don't think we need a state. But if we're going to have a state and it's going to exist anyway, because that's just the paradigm we're in, I really want that state to be doing good things that I agree with.
Yeah, but they also need to be limited. Like one of the things that Bukele said, it's a viral clip. I love it. He's like, you know, if the government can print money, why are you paying taxes?
Yeah.
So you have this false perception of contributing to what's taking place. You
Because
know,
his government can't print money.
yeah.
Oh.
And so it's like, I think that the government needs some sort of a governor or a regulator, something to limit its spending. And that's like, you have a tax pool. We all grow up, like I grew up believing that like you vote for a politician or whatever politicians get elected. You have these elected officials. We're all societally agreeing to contribute into this pot of resources that these people that we elect are going to allocate and fund for whatever. But the reality is that they keep, through debasing the currency, funding things that otherwise the people would not want to fund. Like if they give you a tax bill and they're like, okay, this is for roads, this is for schools, this is for clean water, here's for blowing up brown people, here's for gender studies in Bangladesh. People be like, you could get fucked. I'm not paying for gender studies in Bangladesh. I'm not gonna fucking fund bombs for, you know, to protect the petrodollar. I'm, you know, like I'll pay for this, but I'm not gonna pay for that. And so they debase the currency. So you have this silent hand stealing from people. And it also creates this like division amongst the society where
And
people,
anxiety.
dude, they're all confused. But everybody knows that they're getting fucked, but they don't know who's screwing them. They don't know that there's this invisible hand, the central bank apparatus, that's just debasing and, dude, effectively stealing their property.
What you just said, Eric, is something that everybody listening to this needs to internalize. And this is the message we need to really, you know, get out there and, you know, spread to our friends who might not be in Bitcoin or the people who might understand all of these problems. You need to ask them exactly what you said. If the government can print money, why do you pay taxes? What is money? People don't ask those two questions.
Yeah.
And if they did, they would start to really understand the world. And like Michael Saylor says, I just did the maths. I can't remember the exact quote from Saylor, but he says, you spend 90,000 hours working in your life. How many hours do you spend trying to keep and protect your money?
Yep. You spend your whole life trying to make it, but how many people actually learn what money is and learn how to keep it? You know, then it's like a Jeff Booth quote comes to mind, where you have abundance in money, you create scarcity in everything else. Because if the money is shitty, then you incentivize people to hoard anything that's harder than the money. So then you have people, dude, it's interesting. People are hoarding houses, contributing to homelessness, driving up the housing prices, the homeless crisis, leveraging their newfound equity based upon the debasement of the currency, outcompeting first-time home buyers to buy more houses. Then they're saving their retirement accounts in equities like Google and these large mega corporations, running around complaining about why you have these monopolies that are too big. And so it's a major issue. And where you have a scarcity in money, you create abundance in everything else. Like dude, I'd much rather have Bitcoin than any other thing. I think that Bitcoin's the only asset on planet Earth. Everything else is a liability.
It's kind of why real estate is a shitcoin in a little bit, because people are fleeing to real estate thinking that they're parking their money in an asset, right, that's appreciating in value. But really, when you compare it to Bitcoin, it's losing its purchasing power, you know? And so it's like they think they're escaping inflation by going to real estate, but in reality, they're just prolonging the process.
Yeah, well, I tell people that your house is going down in value like your car is. You just can't see it because the dollar is being debased so fast that the house looks like it's appreciating, but it's only appreciating in dollar terms. But the dollar's not being debased fast enough that your car's going up in value in dollar terms.
I feel like that's something you talked about in that video we made at that park one time. Is like, if you have all the masses living in the suburbs with their nice house, if they don't think or believe their house is worth $1 million, then suddenly everyone stops playing the game.
Yeah, and I think that it goes back to they can't save the money. Like my stepmother, my father's wife, she's a stem cell doctor, and she's been earning a surplus for many, many years. And every year she needs to go and buy more houses because it's just the thing to do, because she can't just stick the money in the bank. You know, I'm at dinner last night with some friends. They're talking about, oh, this person's got so much money. No. That person's got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of money. What do you mean? What do they have? Do they got $100 million in the bank account? No. They have a real estate portfolio and a portfolio of equities, maybe a couple commodities. Like, they don't have money, they have stuff. We've monetized all this stuff because the money is shitty. People are like, oh, I have these people that have all this money. No, they have a bunch of stuff. They can't save the money. Bitcoin's the first money humanity has ever had. We've had yellow shiny rocks. We've had equity in companies. We've had real estate. And then now we have an engineered money. It's the first money. We've been using things as money, but we've never actually had a money. And so that's like, people don't ask, what is money? People spend their whole lives trying to figure out how to make it, but they don't even know what it is. But you figure it out. Like, it's not hard. Like, if you're, as you're growing up, oh, you got to invest in assets. Well, what's investing? It's just saving your economic surplus.
What you said about real estate was a massive one. I don't think a lot of people understand just how much they're contributing to poverty by owning 3 to 5 to 10 different homes. A lot of people are kind of acting out of survival. They're like, okay, they understand something's wrong. They understand their money's losing 10 to 15% a year. They understand they need to invest into something that outpaces that debasement. And they naturally go to real estate. And they spend their whole life just buying as many properties as they can. And in Australia, it's the dream. Nothing's as safe as brick and mortar, they say in Australia. You need to buy your 3 to 5, your 10 homes, and you're golden.
Oh my God.
But people don't think, what is that doing to the millennials or my future generations? What's that doing to my kids? In Sydney, for example, you need 15 times the average income to buy the average size home in Sydney.
Oh my
So
God.
it's ridiculous. If the average income is $100,000, the average home is 1.5 million in Sydney today. And right now, if you have a look at the global real estate market, it's more than $300 trillion in size. And by my estimations, I think 70% of that is a monetary premium.
Totally agree.
A lot of people say, what's the use case of Bitcoin? What's the total addressable market cap of Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin's coming for $230 trillion just in the global real estate market.
Totally agree.
And doing that, adopting Bitcoin, people always ask, what do you do for work? I don't like to tell them what I do. So and people always say, oh, what do you make videos about? I don't tell them Bitcoin. I say I make videos about trying to solve the world's problems, about humanitarian problems, because Bitcoin is a humanitarian solution. It is the most liberating thing that the world can do by adopting Bitcoin, because you're all of a sudden making homes available and affordable for our kids and our future generations. So I just had to go on the real estate range.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin's the only thing Saylor refers to it as the only ethical investment.
Yes.
It's the only thing that you can hoard that doesn't have a second or third order unethical and negative effect. By hoarding real estate, you're contributing to homelessness. But you'll never be able to stop somebody from trying to figure out how to store up their surplus. They need to put it somewhere. I think about it in terms of like, we're all squirrels going through the forest of life, trying to procure acorns to survive the winter. And if you can get enough acorns to make it through one winter, but you still have the ability to go get more acorns, you're going to. If you can survive multiple winters, or you can procure multiple winters worth of acorns, you're going to do so. But if that means that other squirrels are going to not get acorns, that's a problem. But if you could dematerialize the acorn, you can turn it into like, and I'm a little spiritual in my ways, but it's like metaphysical property. You have this metaphysical finite property, matter, that you can convert into what you need when you need it. So hoarding it doesn't hurt anybody. And the fact that you're hoarding it because you have a finite supply actually strengthens the purchasing power, the power, the convertibility into other goods or services in that monetary unit. So you're benefiting other people by hoarding the Bitcoin. So that's a special thing. Like, it's the first thing in human history that you can hoard ethically, and it helps other people by doing so. And so when people are all fucked up over BlackRock's buying all the coins, good. They're pumping your bags. Good. They're not buying more single family rentals or single family homes in the States. Like, every day a motherfucker wakes up like me and has that epiphany moment. Like, wait a second. I don't want an apartment building. That's crazy. I want some real scarcity. I want some invisible metaphysical property that nobody can debase, violate, confiscate, whatever. Like, I don't want anything but the hardest asset in human history.
So I got a question about this.
Boom.
And it's about BlackRock, right? And I get that. Hoarding Bitcoin makes the whole ecosystem stronger because, it's a finite supply. And so, but in terms of the concern around BlackRock, right? It's that they buy up enough real estate in the Bitcoin network that they can now create a centralizing force. And that itself is a danger. Now, I've talked to you and I've talked to Luke about it, but just for our listeners who would, counter what you said about BlackRock with that argument, what would you say?
Go ahead, Luke.
Sorry. Yeah, I think this comes back to the magic of Satoshi. So the issuance schedule of Bitcoin was incredible. They issued 50% of the supply in the first 4 years. 10.5 million Bitcoin were issued before 2012, before the US feds came to realize that Ross Ulbricht was running Silk Road. That was the first time the US government, or I believe anyone in any sort of intelligence departments, even heard of what Bitcoin was, and they began to become skeptical about it.
Wait a
2013.
minute. Hey, wait a minute. What's the story of the guy? Who's that guy that was in Bitcoin early that went to do a presentation? He posted about it on Bitcoin Talk. He went to do a presentation for the CIA,
Gavin.
and then
Yeah.
he disappeared after. Wasn't that before 2012?
I believe that was Gavin Andreessen.
When was that?
That was maybe 2000. Oh, it's date. Oh, it's a
Oh,
long.
but he didn't disappear, Gavin Andreessen.
No, he didn't disappear.
Satoshi then disappeared.
Satoshi disappeared after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right. But wasn't that before Silk Road?
That was probably 2011 or 2011 maybe. So because it was when Julian Assange began accepting Bitcoin for
Right.
payment for WikiLeaks. I don't remember if that was 2010 or 2011. I should know exactly when Satoshi disappeared, but it was before the Silk Road got shut down in 2012 or 2013.
Right. So it was on their radar a little bit.
A little bit. But what has me optimistic? Because I'm probably one of the most pessimistic people. I spent
Doesn't seem like it.
Oh, no. I've spent thousands of hours thinking about how the hell could I be wrong? This crazy internet money. How does this fail? Now, for me, what keeps me optimistic is 10 million coins were mined in the first 4 years. And right now, what is it? 90% of the Bitcoin has been mined. And there's only 2 million-ish Bitcoin that circulates on exchanges for sale every day. So let's assume BlackRock continues buying. I believe the most they could get their hands on is maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 million coins. I really think that would be a stretch. I don't think that they're going to get their hands on 4 million coins. But I think if they've got less than 5 or 10% of the supply, I think Bitcoin is still obviously going to be okay. I'm obviously concerned about them having an economic majority and an economic power if there was a controversial hard fork. Again, Bitcoin's not a proof of stake network, but I wouldn't like BlackRock to be sitting on 30% of the supply. Let's put that number out there.
Yeah, what alleviated my concern a little bit about this is recognizing how much hash power is now being distributed around the world. I know Max Kaiser's always tweeting about the global hash wars, and El Salvador itself has put themselves in the battlefield with their volcano mining. But to me, I think that supply alone is not going to dictate, a centralizing force. You need also the hash power to then reinforce whatever hostile hard fork is being perpetrated. And I feel like that now is out of the window.
So if BlackRock acquired 5 million coins, for example, that the amount of coins that they have doesn't give them any more control over the network. It's the hash power. And so it's my understanding that if you harnessed all of the computing power from every laptop, server, smartphone, everything outside of the ASICs and the Bitcoin mining network, you don't have enough computing power to successfully launch a 51% attack against the network. And then additionally, then the node just denies the false block. And so and pertains to your question about BlackRock and concerns about BlackRock, I think this is a matter of not hating the player, but hating the game. It's a fiat debt-based monetary system where they have to continue to debase the currency to prop the asset prices up. So of course, BlackRock is going to go ahead and buy assets that they can lever against to buy more assets, and real estate's a good one for that. And so and if BlackRock decided to, or the United States government do take some sort of orchestrated effort to acquire a bunch of Bitcoin and then dump those Bitcoins on the market, it's motherfucking economic Darwinism. Dude, people understand. Enough people get this globally that it would put them out of business. And the thing that's pretty amazing with Bitcoin too is you can audit the supply. So I feel like there was a game theoretic fuckness where the dishonest participants in the BB, I call it the BB world, the world before Bitcoin, if they could get away with their dishonestness. If you're it's like the central bank that housed gold and issued more certificates than they had gold on reserve. if as long as there wasn't a bank run, and then now you got bank holidays, they closed the banks, so they can prevent you from doing a bank run. That means that the dishonest market actor has an unfair competitive advantage against the honest actor. And Bitcoin flips that on its head because you can audit the supply. So if one of these ETFs issues more claims to Bitcoin than they have Bitcoin on reserve, at some point they'll get exposed, and the dishonest market participant will now get weeded out of existence, and the honest ones will be the ones that survive.
Yeah.
So with that inversion, it literally flips everything on its head.
Yeah, I think about that a lot as far as which ETF is gonna be the first to be blown up because they're issuing more, more paper Bitcoin than they have on reserve.
Yeah, and I think that it's possible that there's, one that takes a blow intentionally, so that then their elite overlord homies can get some cheap sats. But it's all temporary, and so I'm pretty farsighted in this. I think that you can't go from the world that we were in, or you can't go from a place where there's as much dishonesty, confusion, corruption, to a world where everything is pure and bright, and it doesn't just change overnight, but you can change the direction in an instant. And I think Satoshi fundamentally changed the direction of where our civilization is going. And people will ask me too, like,
inflection point.
Totally. When's hyper Bitcoinization going to happen? It's happening. Open your eyes. What do you mean? Like, I'm shocked that we're talking, dude. Trump's talking about a Bitcoin treasury reserve. Cynthia Lummis is drafting a bill. Dude, Bitcoin's 60 grand a coin right now. I didn't think that was going to happen until we were at 6 million a coin. Like, I didn't think we were going to be in this nation state rush. And I think that there's a psyop taking place too. Like the fact that Gary G didn't come out a long time ago and say, hey, these are all unregistered securities. Bitcoin's a commodity. We're going to shut these down. I don't care if it takes us 100 years. Like, I think that there's a orchestrated effort to allow the everyday individual to get wrecked buying dog coins so that the real powerful people can figure out how to develop a position.
Price over the past 4 years has been the biggest lagging indicator. I've been on record for a long time, but I think like the price over the past 4 years has not matched the fundamentals of Bitcoin one bit. The past bear market was the first bear market in Bitcoin's history where we saw the price of Bitcoin going down, but we saw the coins on exchanges leaving the exchanges. So price of Bitcoin was going down, but somebody was quietly accumulating Bitcoin all 2022 and all 2023 as it crashed from the high $60,000 down to $15,000. And at the same time, so that was the first time in history that we've seen a bear market in price and a bear market in supply. So supply going somewhere. We also saw something similar in the hash rate. So going back to our discussion about centralization and hash rate, for the first time in Bitcoin's life, price was going down in 2022. Hash rate was going fucking parabolic.
Yeah.
Hash rate was at 80 exahashes or whatever it was after China banned Bitcoin mining. Today, it's at like 700 exahashes. So hash has more than 10x'd. Price is at the same price it was 3 years ago. Today, it's the first time in history we've seen that. And to kind of put a pin on what you were saying earlier about this inflection point has already happened. And we're worried about the centralizers, the BlackRocks, the US governments, the biggest boys in the fiat game. We're worried about them getting into Bitcoin. Again, I'm cautious. I'm keeping an eye on them. I don't trust Uncle Larry Stink, big old Larry Fink over at BlackRock. But
Gary G.
Yeah, he's the one. But I really don't. I think we're good because these smaller nations are proportionately taking enormous chunks in the Bitcoin network. El Salvador's got a GDP of what, 20 to 30 billion, and they've got $1 billion invested into Bitcoin mining. That's a 5% per GDP chunk invested into Bitcoin mining. Oman in the Middle East, they've invested over $1 billion into Bitcoin mining.
Really?
The kicker is in Southeast Asia. The Kingdom of Bhutan, tiny country, less than 1 million people. They're a strange country. They've got a happiness index over there in the Kingdom of Bhutan. So they're an odd bunch, right? But they're a tiny country. Their GDP is $2.5 billion, and they've invested $500 million into Bitcoin mining. So that is like a 20% investment of their GDP into Bitcoin mining. And this goes into, this decentralization that we're living through. I think these bigger nation states proportionally cannot invest 20% of their GDP into Bitcoin to keep up with the Kingdom of Bhutan, or El Salvador, who's going to be rising because of their stature and their size in comparison to these bigger countries. they're simply going to catch up to these bigger Western nations as the Western nations kind of decline. Okay. Yes, it can be scary that BlackRock holds 2% of the supply, but proportionally, Bhutan, Oman, El Salvador, they're rising because the US has a GDP of 30 trillion. They cannot invest 20% of their GDP into Bitcoin mining. What's that? A $6 trillion investment or something ridiculous?
Why can't they?
There's only $1 trillion of Bitcoin, let alone the Bitcoin mining chips. So for the US to keep its reign of having 20 to 30% of the global GDP and 20 to 30% of the economic might, they can't get 20% of the Bitcoin because there's only 1 trillion. There's a $1 trillion market out there. So I think this is a decentralizing revolution. From a numbers and a nominal standpoint, it can look scary if BlackRock and Coinbase have 1 or 2 million coins, but that's only really 1 or 2% of the network. So I think it's good to keep an eye on this stuff, but I think like this is a decentralizing protocol, and I haven't seen anything that really worries me from a centralization standpoint yet.
You were saying something earlier. You mentioned 2 million coins being available on exchanges right now. And earlier while we were barbecuing, you said the same thing to make a bullish case for what, 250K Bitcoin?
Yeah, so it's like I don't know. I might botch the numbers, but I'll just throw it out there. They might not be accurate. But it's the multiplier effect. The price is set at the margin. So I believe it was like $8 billion or so came into the market as a result of the ETFs, and it pumped the market cap like 300 and some odd billion dollars. So it's like a 30 some odd multiplier or something. And it's a little late. My math might not be right, but we were talking earlier. If it's like $500 billion of capital comes in, it'll increase the market cap because there's only 2 million coins available. Even if that 500 billion could buy all 2 million of those coins, it's going to push the price up to $250,000 a coin to $6 trillion. So you don't need $4 trillion of capital to come into the market to push the market cap up $4 trillion, to push the coin from per Bitcoin from 60 grand a coin to $250,000 a coin. Another thing that I think that really ties into what you're saying is these small countries that are stacking sats and mining Bitcoin are in a position where they have equity. The United States government is fundamentally insolvent. It's upside down. Like they owe more than what they have, assets on reserve. It's negative equity. It's upside down. Like that's what the 2008 housing market bubble was predicated upon. The housing prices started to fall. Nobody has much equity. What people are putting 5% down on their houses. Housing prices fall 10%. People are wrecked. They stop paying their bills. The only difference is that the United States government can debase their way out of that, which further exacerbates the problem. But if they start putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, the Bitcoin's appreciating as other people are putting energy into that monetary network. And over time, if the United States government has Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset, everybody from the pleb all the way on up to the nation states and the central banks, the more Bitcoin that hits the balance sheet, the more solvency there is within the system. And you have a thermodynamically sound asset on the balance sheet, meaning that the debasement over time to keep the system solvent should decrease. And so I think that that's a thing that a lot of people, I mean, I don't know, I could be totally fucked in the head, but I think about this a lot. Like we have a debt-based monetary system where the monetary units are being lent into existence as debt against assets. But all the assets that they're lending money into existence against are fundamentally defective. They're bleeding energy. None of them are thermodynamically sound. They're all being debased. As we become more technologically advanced and more productive, we're producing more of everything for less, except for Bitcoin. And the things that we're producing more of, equities, real estate, these are collateralizing the debt. So they're requiring more debasement to quote unquote prop the asset prices up. But if they start lending money into existences against Bitcoin, which I believe they will because it's supreme collateral, I think it's only a matter of time before they do that. As Bitcoin hits the balance sheet of the financial institutions, as it grows in value, it'll end up being a larger percentage of the balance sheet, meaning that the amount of debasement to keep the system solvent should decrease. And so a lot of people think that Bitcoin is a threat to the dollar, and I think it is ultimately going to replace the dollar, but I actually think it's going to bring solvency back into the system. We went from at one point a 1-to-1. I think about like the dollar was a layer 2 on top of gold, where gold struggled because of its physicality. You needed a layer on top of it so you could travel with certificates, dollars. And we started to debase the amount of dollars we had in the system relative to the gold on reserve. And we finally completely detached in 1971. I think we're going to reattach to Bitcoin, and over time, the debasement required to keep the system solvent will decrease. Look, like the reason Jerome Powell and all these people look like fucking idiots is because they're trying to make sense of something you can't make sense of. You can't fix the problem. Like it's not solvable without having a thermodynamically sound monetary instrument or asset that's collateralizing the debt. And at some point, you won't need the debt. So at least that's what I think.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with Lukey Broyles and Peter Dunworth, one of my favorite Australian Bitcoiners, a little while ago. And they said something kind of similar. I think it's a great point that you make. And they essentially said, look, America doesn't have a debt problem. It's got a demand problem for their debt. And I sat there and I was thinking for a minute, because I'm one of the guys who screams from the hills. Debt spiral. They're printing money out of the wazoo. There's $1 trillion new dollars being printed every 100 days. America has a debt problem. This is bananas, right? And I was thinking about it for a minute. I was like, hang on a minute. That actually makes sense. America doesn't have a debt problem. They have a demand problem. And that's because there's no equity in the country. They've got $34 trillion of debt and they've got no equity. They've got no sound money. They've got nothing to back up that debt. They've got no reason backing up that $34 trillion of debt that is going to eventually bring enough demand to buy all of the debt that America needs to sell. $220 trillion of unfunded liabilities. But if America makes a strategic investment of, say, $500 billion into Bitcoin, that's a popular number because a lot of the large sovereign wealth funds have about that much money in them. The Qatar sovereign wealth funds, 500 billion, Saudi Arabia, something similar. And there's a lot of rumors circulating earlier in the year that these two big Middle Eastern giants were going to plow their entire sovereign wealth funds into Bitcoin and get a $500 billion allocation. If America were to do that and get a $500 billion allocation to Bitcoin, what happens if that Bitcoin 10x's? All of a sudden, they've got $5 trillion of equity that they can somehow back their $34 trillion of debt with. And all of a sudden, maybe, just maybe, America can have a shit ton of debt. They can have $100 trillion of debt. But if they've got 10 or $20 trillion of Bitcoin as a strategic reserve backing that debt, all of a sudden, no, America doesn't have a debt problem. They actually can find demand for their debt. That's one angle that I think I agree that I think Bitcoin can help extend the US dollar's life cycle. That's a little bit more theoretical in the distance because we have to assume America buys the debt. But right now, my argument is that the Bitcoin milkshake theory, it's something I just spun up one day, is already helping America. Because right now, the world's dumping US treasuries because they're looking at this equation. They can see there's $34 trillion of debt. There's nothing backing that debt. There's no equity. I'm not buying those pieces of toilet paper. Russia's completely de-dollarized. Japan and China, the world's largest US treasury holders, they're dumping treasuries over the past 2 years for the first time in 50 years, right? So who's... You go.
Real quick, so I understand, because there's a lot going on here. Are you saying that America starts stacking Bitcoin in order to back their treasuries?
They will.
Yeah.
That was the high level of my rant. And that's more theoretical. That's theoretically how the US can save its $34 trillion debt problem and its $200 trillion unfunded liability problem. The only way out is Bitcoin. But whether they like it or not, Bitcoin is already the sugar daddy for Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Because the only person buying treasuries today, it's actually Tether. It's US dollar stable coins. So if you look out there amongst Tether, USDC, and even MakerDAO, a little US dollar stablecoin on Ethereum, they're all buying US treasuries hand over fist. And the US dollar
short-term T-bills.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what's interesting about this is Tether right now is like in the top 15 nation states around the world. If it were to be a nation state, that's a US treasury holder. They hold more treasuries than Mexico, Australia, these massive G20 nations. And all of a sudden, what's interesting, and you know where I come up with this idea about the Bitcoin milkshake theory, is the US could hypothetically, they could raise interest rates at the fastest rate in human history, create an enormous wave of inflation in Latin America and South America, in Colombia, Argentina, Turkey. Look at all these countries that have blown up their currency over the past 2 or 3 years after the US raised interest rates so aggressively. 100% inflation in Turkey, 250% inflation in Argentina. what's interesting is these countries have the highest amount of demand for US dollar stablecoins. Argentina, Pakistan, the countries with the weakest currencies have the highest amount of demand for US dollar stablecoins. And all of a sudden, they're buying US treasuries. So I don't know, but I like Eric, I agree. I really strongly believe that the US government is aware that stablecoins is actually good for the hegemony of the US dollar global reserve currency standard. And I actually think that US dollar stablecoins and the monetization of Bitcoin is good for America, because this is something most people don't understand. Where Bitcoin's adopted, it's not just Bitcoin that's adopted. People also want US dollar stablecoins. And hypothetically, what happens if the Turkish lira hyperinflates tomorrow? Let's say they adopt a Bitcoin standard. They can't just adopt Bitcoin, because you can't use Bitcoin as a unit of account. So if you're assuming the Turkish lira is toilet paper and the government, Erdogan, adopts Bitcoin tomorrow, that's great. But they also need to adopt the most stable fiat currency to price goods and services in, which is the US dollar. So I don't know how you cut the cookie.
Can I ask you something about that?
Hit me.
So it perpetuates the current dollar regime, right? But does the fact that they need Bitcoin also limit then the, amount of fuckery that they can create in the system as well? Does it act as a check and balance then? Like, if we're perpetuating the dollar and which they can then inflate, does it just continue the corruption that we see from the fiat system, or is it something that now limits them?
On a nominal basis for the globe, it will decrease the fuckery, because the stronger the US dollar gets and the more this Bitcoin milkshake theory brews, so to say, the more you're going to have countries like Argentina have to dollarize and adopt US dollars. So all of a sudden there's less fuckery in Argentina. All of these African countries that suffer from immense plunder, like immense plunder. There is so much fuckery going on in Africa. There's so much corruption. There is so many devaluations, 50% devaluations overnight in many countries in Africa. The stronger the US dollar gets and the longer Bitcoin can help prolong the dollar, all of a sudden, all around the world, these other countries are going to have to start adopting a sounder monetary standard. So for the US, yes, the fuckery is going to be prolonged a little bit longer. But if they're 10% backed by Bitcoin or 20% backed by Bitcoin, the fuckery is less than it would have been otherwise.
It seems like a softer landing too than just complete currency collapse.
Dude, Bitcoin's the ultimate bailout, and it's the ultimate tool for a soft landing. And I think a lot of people want to see fiat get turned off overnight and want to see us on a Bitcoin standard. I don't think they really know what that means. I don't think you really want that. It would be fucking mayhem. It would be apocalyptic times if the dollar collapsed. And so what comes to mind when you're talking about that and the T-bills and the just the debt issues is Saylor. So, and another thing that Saylor says is, all currencies are going to collapse into the dollar, and all property is going to collapse into Bitcoin. All assets will collapse into Bitcoin. And another thing that can happen with the treasury market and the government is a similar thing to what Saylor is doing with MicroStrategy. He's diluting his shareholders by issuing more MicroStrategy shares, but he's buying more Bitcoin. And so each share is backed by more Bitcoin. So the dilution isn't actually dilutive, it's accretive. And so if the government is issuing more treasuries, but there's actually Bitcoin backing the treasuries that are being issued actually have more value. The reason that these countries are dumping their treasuries is because there's nothing backing it. We don't even know if there's any gold in Fort Knox. And so if Bitcoin's being held on as a treasury asset, then it is bringing some level of solvency into the system. There's equity there.
So,
Damn.
So are they accumulating Bitcoin right now without, are they in the markets right now stacking sats?
The government?
Yeah.
I don't know. They've seized some. Apparently, they've been selling some. I don't know. Is that true? Did the United States government? David Bailey was tweeting about their dumping coins. I don't know if that's real.
So Germany was dumping coins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, you know what? If that's the case, I think about this too. Politicians treat the government like a fucking rental car. They get in there and they floor it. They jam on the brakes. They jump it over the rail track. They don't give a fuck. They're like, I'm in here and I'm going to drive this bitch as hard as possible to get as much as I can out of it. I'm going to pass this piece of shit on to the next guy. I don't give a fuck.
Sounds like a rental car in El Salvador.
Totally. Yeah, so, you know, I was thinking about that with Germany. So, you know, if Germany's dumping their coins, BlackRock's buying them, we're buying them, people are buying them. So there's a certain, I don't know, there's something there where, like, they treat it like a fucking rental. They don't care.
It's poetic, isn't it? In 2024, Germany dumps their 50,000 Bitcoin stash exactly 100 years after they hyperinflate the German mark in 1924. I think Germany have once again just demonstrated that they're not rational thinkers. They've shut down all their nuclear power plants. They're sliding. They're no longer the manufacturing powerhouse of Europe anymore because they're making irrational decisions. Dumping 50,000 Bitcoin is just another one of those. And I mean, to go back to the US government discussion, I saw them move 10,000 Bitcoin to an exchange wallet. I haven't seen any confirmation to see that they've sold any yet. That was the day after Trump said he was gonna make Bitcoin a strategic stockpile, which was interesting timing. But
so you don't know if they actually sold any coins?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
I did see they moved the 10,000 coins, but I haven't seen any confirmation that they've sold any.
That's interesting. Yeah, you know, it's like with Germany, it's Bitcoin is not understanding Bitcoin or selling your Bitcoin. It's economic Darwinism. Yeah. Like you need to figure it out or you're not gonna make it.
And that's, you know, with Germany, it seems like self-immolation, right? It's like they just lit themselves on fire, dude. they tore down their nuclear plants. They sold out their Bitcoin. It's like, what's left but just to die? Like,
but it's funny, you could argue about that like any point in history, like as we just see empires kind of just migrate around the world, and certain places that were once very wealthy and well off are now shitholes. Right, 100 years later, this has always happened in history, and now this is just kind of happening almost just faster.
So speaking of that, right? Like just piggybacking off what you said, then the passing of the torch of empires, right? And now you have this small little country here, El Salvador, stacking sats on a daily basis, right? Bukele buying 1 Bitcoin a day. Completely transparent. You can go on their government website and see him stacking sats.
That's insane. Because how long has it been? 1 Bitcoin a day. It's like that's adding up.
What, they have 5,000 coins?
I mean, it's been years.
So what does that do to this small little country here in Central America? How does that transform this country? I'm curious your thoughts.
It propels it into maybe the top 25 from a GDP standpoint in the next, 20 to 50 years. I think it's really interesting because on a Bitcoin standard, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult to kind of, have your places, shift, so to say. Like, I mean, America is always going to be an economic powerhouse because it's America. Like they have a ton of energy. I think they produce the second most amount of oil in the world behind Russia. They produce a ton of oil. They have a ton of natural resources. They've got a ton of land. They've got so many good things going for them. And I think even on a Bitcoin standard, countries like America are going to still be okay, and they're still going to be in the top 20, irrespective of just how bad they fuck it up. And maybe the same could be true for Germany. But I mean, like, I think a Bitcoin standard could be like a bit of gasoline on the flame for these smaller countries, like the Kingdom of Bhutan. They're going to be the countries who can climb from, the 100th biggest GDP in the world to maybe even being top 25.
Mm-hmm.
Like Singapore in the 1960s completely transformed itself in 10 years just by having different policies, open itself up for free trade, and just making better decisions. If you have a look at the GDP per capita of Singapore in 1950 and then have a look at it in 1970, it's like a hockey stick chart. It looks ridiculous. It looks absolutely nuts. And El Salvador and countries like the Kingdom of Bhutan, they're going to be seeing very similar things over the next 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, and I think it's that disproportionate benefit, that first mover advantage that comes along with, getting into Bitcoin sooner or earlier. And I think what MicroStrategy has done, what Sailor's done with MicroStrategy, and what Bukele's done with El Salvador is like these are playbooks that other nation states are going to have to adopt. And I don't think that they can avoid it. And I think that, Bhutan and El Salvador and the people that have got in early are going to really benefit as a result. But this is the thing that's so special about Bitcoin. We all win as everybody's joining in the network. And it does kind of puts us into a situation where we can actually trade fairly globally. One of the biggest issues is people don't want to be trick fucked. Like the United States is essentially printing money out of thin air and trading it, globally for resources that take energy to produce.
Yep.
Nobody wants that. Except for, maybe the United States or the people in charge of doing so. And so, yeah, it actually means that we're all playing the same economic game. We can trade fairly now. We have an honest ledger. Like, this is a monumentally big deal, and it's going to really revolutionize, and it's going to allow us to get along. It's going to allow us to be more abundant, more productive. Like, I think Jeff Booth says there's like around 300 million people globally, and I could be wrong about the numbers, but are living wonderful lives essentially on the backs of like 7 billion people that are impoverished through these unfair trade, dynamics as a result of the debasement of the currency. And then you have to go in and you have to blow people up. Dude, like Gaddafi wants to trade. He's like, I'm going to take gold. No, now he's a terrorist. We're going to drag him through the streets. We're going to blow him up. So it's like, it's a monumental issue. And it's,
So speaking of that, so first mover advantage and the fact that anyone that goes against dollar hegemony somehow seems to get, taken out. One of the things that I was concerned about with El Salvador is just that fact. It was like, holy cow, they're sticking their neck out. Like Bukele is a brave, brave man. We talk about strong men create good times. That's one of them, right? To put his head out there and to say, no, hey, we're going to go this route. We're not going to go the fiat route anymore. We're going to start, embracing decentralization and giving power back to the people. That was, I think, just something that you don't see from political leaders often. And so I was always worried about, hey, what's going to happen to him? But I think he's made some strong political, geopolitical allies around the world. Has kind of shielded him from that. But like, I'm always wondering, is that still a threat? And then when's the next nation state going to realize, that he's just led his country and his family towards prosperity and then jump on that ship as well?
Yeah, I would like to actually hear from you guys what you think about what kind of risk is he in? Because the first thing that comes to my mind is there's no real resources that are worth coming and taking here necessarily. You're not going to get the Bitcoin. What are you going to come and take? And so also it's almost creates, what is it, the Streisand effect? Where if they come in and they take over, hey, no, you can't do that. It's just going to be a signal to everybody else that this is a real solution that's a threat. Like, yeah, hold on. So you can't necessarily do that. I don't know. Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. Like there's, this dollar hegemony is, but that's where it goes back to. I don't think Bitcoin is a threat to anybody. I think it's a solution for everybody, including the central bankers, including the government apparatus that's responsible for debasing the currency and bifurcating our society and blowing people up. I think this is all predicated upon.
They know that?
I think they're figuring it out. I think that if a cannabis farming, weed smoking pleb like me can see the light, like I think that these individuals can figure it out.
Sure hope so.
Yeah.
I think there are some people who, like you said, there's 300 million people who are benefiting off the backs of 7 billion people. I couldn't agree more. And I think there are some people amongst those 300 million who understand that it's actually a strategic advantage that there is 1.8 billion people unbanked around the world today. There are some evil, crafty, not nice people in the world who understand very clearly that their position in the top 500 world's richest leaderboard is protected by the fact that there's an unfair monetary system. And that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. All of a sudden, the rules have changed. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and with Bitcoin, we can go out there and actually start transacting economic value with those 1.8 billion people in the world who are not allowed in the economic system. It doesn't matter what kind of brilliant idea someone in Africa creates. If they've got no resources, no way to raise money, no way to get into the banking system, no way to get paid, they can't actually capitalize on their brilliant ideas. So we've got to really think, how many Albert Einsteins or Elon Musks are there hiding in Africa or Southeast Asia or even here in El Salvador, where 70% of the population were unbanked before Bitcoin and before Bukele took over? There's a lot. There's a lot of economic potential that will be unlocked by Bitcoin.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm going to try to formulate or regurgitate. Somebody was talking about, maybe it was Tom Bilyeu. I heard Jeff Booth speaking to something about this, but like there is an unfair element to like, if you're born in the wrong place in the world, like it doesn't matter what kind of ingenuity or intelligence you have, like you're not going to be able to make an impact. So we have this untapped talent there. We have people that could revolutionize the world that just essentially aren't participating in the system. They're unbanked and they're in places where they have no opportunity. And so no real incentive to actually get involved and help solve problems. And so, yeah, it's
like that analogy of when you have basketball courts on every corner, then you're going to have more LeBron James
totally
come out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Bitcoin allows that.
The
Any other.
No, 100%. Great point. I think like the internet was the first step in this revolution, which enabled all of these creators from everywhere around the world to be able to come up with a great idea and tell people about their idea online. But unless you have financial sovereignty, doesn't matter if you've got access to the internet, because if you try to raise money or get paid, someone like PayPal is just going to say, sorry, boys, if we don't like what you say, we're going to take $2,500 out of your bank account. That's what PayPal said to its users in 2022. It said, sorry, if you post something online we don't like, or if you come from a country we don't like, we're going to take your money. So I think Bitcoin with the combination of the internet, that's the revolution right there. And that is the unstoppable technology that is going to shrink nation states over the next century.
Dude, and every time that happens, it helps other people realize that they need Bitcoin. Like I remember when the truckers, the GoFundMe money got seized, I'm literally jumping up and down in my living room telling my wife, like, this is orange pilling people right now in real time. Come out a couple of years later, RFK Jr. is talking about, yeah, I woke up to how important Bitcoin was when the truckers got censored. You couldn't get funds to the truckers. So every time that there's some sort of issue like that, it just highlights the need for Bitcoin. Like all roads lead to Bitcoin, no matter what, like every possible scenario that I've thought about. And I mean, some of the most brilliant minds in the world are just playing this out all day, talking about it all day, every day. Like, that's why we have the saying, all roads lead to Bitcoin. I don't think anybody's figured out a scenario that doesn't send us into a Bitcoin standard. It's the only thing would be an unknown unknown, a true black swan. And if as long as it stays decentralized and secure, and I think it's the most probable thing in the marketplace. Like the most probable thing that happens is Bitcoin goes up at a faster rate than everything else forever. Like it's all probabilistic, but I think that's the most probable thing. You can bank on that at a higher probability than anything else in our economy globally.
Couldn't agree more.
Goes to zero. Get Bitcoin.
Where's the guitar?
I think that's the saying.
Yeah, it is.
That was a great rip the other night. No, I think that's such a great point that I think took me a long time to internalize. For a long time, I thought the highest probability outcome was that Bitcoin would just become digital gold, be an asset, be worth between 500K and a couple of $1 million a coin. And, you know, Bitcoin would be digital gold. And the more I've really thought about it, and the more I've thought about the incentive systems of Bitcoin, if it can stay decentralized and secure, what does that actually do to the world? The more I've thought about it, the more I've begun to agree with CK Snarks. He's working over there with the human, what is it? The Human Resource? No. What's the Human Rights Foundation? That's the one with Gladstein, right?
Isn't that the CoinJoin guy? Or Dev?
No,
Dev?
No, Gladstein's the freedom fighter.
No, ZK Snarks.
No, that's CK Snarks. Christian.
CK Snarks.
Yeah,
Oh,
Christian
okay.
Corrals believes that the most likely probability is hyper-Bitcoinization, and it subsumes a large percentage of the world's, $900 trillion of money in the world. And I typically agree. Like, I think it is more likely that Bitcoin fails and goes to zero than it is just another asset. And it's just 2 to 5% of the world's assets, and it's just digital gold. Preston says this a lot. If Bitcoin gets to $500,000, that is the biggest opening the door moment for the serious money in the world. If Bitcoin is at $500,000 a coin or $1 million a coin, all of a sudden Microsoft can say, hang on a minute, why the fuck am I sitting on $100 billion of melting fiat capital? Now I can go out there and buy some Bitcoin. I got $100 billion. They can't do shit right now. They got $100 billion. You can't go out there and get a 10% Bitcoin stake without mooning the price. But this is the biggest thing people don't get. Samson said something interesting. I've called Bitcoin a Veblen good for a long time, and he said there's a Veblen threshold. So a Veblen good is something where it's a good where it becomes even more attractive and more valuable the higher its price goes. And normally that's weird because most people say, okay, if the price of gold goes up, all of a sudden I'm going to sell it because I know that gold miners are going to go out there, increase the supply of it, and put more supply onto the market. Bitcoin is the first asset in history where you can't do that. 21 million coins. So as the price goes up, it's signaling to everyone around the world, hang on a minute, this thing has more Lindy. It's safer. It's secure. There's more hash rate mining Bitcoin. The price is even higher, signaling more people are beginning to figure it out. That means I have to take a look at Bitcoin, which also triggers the price to go even higher. So Samson, I interviewed him a while ago. He said there's a Veblen threshold point. And this kind of gets into the idea of like a $1 million God candle, which I genuinely believe will happen in the not too distant future.
That was actually my question here to you guys was like, okay, when's the inflection point? And is it like a hockey stick, Weimar hockey stick straight up that we're going to see where people recognize that, oh, shoot, I need to get some Bitcoin. And it's just a mad dash to the exchanges to try to grab some.
Yep, it's coming.
Yeah.
So I agree. It's and you know, if the demand goes up for gold, then unprofitable miners are going to become profitable, and they're just going to go rip up the forest floor and dump gold on the market. If the demand goes through the roof for Bitcoin, Honey Badger don't give a fuck. 21 million forever, dude. It doesn't matter. The supply won't change. Hash rate goes through the roof, difficulty adjustment. The coins are locked in time. No matter what, our entire civilization, if we all got together and everybody was like, we're going to mine the coins, they're locked in time. You're not going to mine them any faster. Demand goes through the roof. It's not going to change the supply. This is what I had the epiphany moment in 2017. I just closed escrow on a property a year prior. I was going through the regulatory process to become a licensed cannabis farmer in the state of California. And so I spent 9 months going down the economic rabbit hole. It led me to Bitcoin, and being a commodity producer, watching the value of the product that I had been producing plummet by, I don't know, 50% in a 12-month period of time, simply as a result of supply satiating demand. The product's becoming more abundant, which should be good for everybody. But as the demand is increased over time, the supply is increasing. So I realized quite quickly that Satoshi essentially paired infinite demand with true scarcity, because it's an engineered money, and whatever the money is will have an infinite demand on it. Like, not everybody on planet Earth wants a microphone or a camera or a bottle of, I don't know, sparkling water or whatever, but everybody will always want infinite amounts of money, because money is a call option on any other good or service the marketplace can produce. So if you have infinite demand with true scarcity, now you have the apex monetary instrument within our civilization. And at that time, I determined this thing's going up forever. This thing's going to rip, or it's going to get destroyed after a few years of, and actually, I really wish in hindsight that I had gone a little bit deeper into it to realize, wait, this thing's indestructible. But when the Sailor series hit, that's when I made the conclusion for myself that this thing's immortal. I don't think it's going away. I think it's indestructible.
Nice. And what about you, Luke? When's the hockey stick straight up coming?
Short answer, 2028. Because that's if the past 4 years of trend continues, we got no Bitcoin on exchanges in 2028. So for the first 12 years of Bitcoin's life, coins only went to exchanges between 2009 and 2020. Something fundamentally changed in the data when Michael Saylor started buying Bitcoin in 2020 and the money printers got turned on globally. Since then, you've seen the supply decrease from 3.1 million to 2 million. So if that trend continues, you got no Bitcoin exchanges about 2028. So that's my short answer. My longer answer is I think it could happen sooner. Everything's a probability. Nobody knows the certain outcome of anything. So in 2020, I think I wrote like a stupidly long 15,000 word essay essentially saying a Bitcoin supercycle is coming because it's a technology that's going to be adopted in an S-curve. All of these theories of diminishing returns, power law models, I don't personally believe in them. I think they're extrapolating old data of Bitcoin into the future. The first 10 years of Bitcoin, I believe, is null data. That's because there were 0.001% of the world's serious capital allocators were interested in Bitcoin pre-2020. So it was just retail speculators, buying Bitcoin to sell it to buy a Lambo. So I think I don't think you can use that 10-year data period. And I think the past 4 years has just been price suppression 101. So I believe
So how? I'm curious about that. How are they suppressing the price of Bitcoin? Are they just creating more Bitcoin and selling it on the open market like naked shorts?
Yeah, so we got to look behind the curtain when FTX went bankrupt. They were supposed to be holding 80,000 Bitcoin for clients. They had zero. They were actively selling. Sam Bankman-Fried was telling his girlfriend, Caroline, sell Bitcoin, paper short Bitcoin every single time it gets above $20,000 a coin. We have transcripts of like phone records and communications coming out about that. So
That's a coordinated effort. That's part of the psyop that I
No.
think is taking place.
And I think it's happening at every exchange. FTX was just 20% of the market at the peak. It was one of the biggest exchanges. I wouldn't be surprised if Binance is swimming naked, Coinbase is swimming naked. They're all swimming naked, all of them. None of them have any Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Damn.
and this, I think about this too. This is plebs. This isn't real money. So when it pertains to that hockey stick, like real money is just starting to get in. There wasn't an existential crisis amongst the world's real elites, but the peasant class has been the people who got us from zero to $1 trillion market cap. And now, so because I think there's a little bit of debate, and I don't know that we're gonna go green, 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 red, because we have real money here now. Like it's proven. Like this thing's not going away. Nation states are buying it. BlackRock's buying it. The FABC rules are changing. I don't know that we're gonna have this big pullback. There might be, I do think that we're going to have some manipulation. We're going to have some stuff like FTX. Some of these ETFs are going to be selling. There's going to be some like orchestrated effort to suppress the price. But yeah, I think that we're going to have a monumental tsunami of capital flow in because there's nowhere else to put it that's effective. All the other assets are fundamentally defective. They're not assets. They're all liabilities. There's one asset, and that's Bitcoin. And everyone's figuring that out.
Eventually, you just see a wave of FOMO.
Yeah.
It's the Veblen threshold. Once Bitcoin hits 200, 300, 400, 500, who knows what that number is? If I had to guess, maybe it's 500 to $1 million a coin. That's when we could see some really crazy things. And I've been loud and proud about this for multiple years now. Bitcoin volatility will not decrease in the future. It's going to increase. Its pathway to get to $10 million a coin is going to happen quicker than most people think, and it's going to be a lot more volatile than most people think. Every single person in the market believes, oh, volatility is decreasing. Bitcoin's becoming a stable asset. Even Saylor's saying this like online. Bitcoin volatility is decreasing. It'll continue to decrease. I'm not so sure. I think we could be in for a real rude
Volatility
shock.
to the upside, huh?
Oh, yeah. And that means volatility potentially for Western nation states as well, which is why, again, I like to really that's why I like to retain a lot of like geographical sovereignty. I don't like to have roots anywhere. Because what does $10 million Bitcoin mean for the Australian government?
What's that transition phase like then? Right? What's that phase like socially for Western nations?
I'm hopeful it's smooth, but I like to be prepared for the worst. I think it's going to be volatile.
You know what? On that note, Bitcoin's not volatile. It's everything else.
Mm.
Bitcoin's not changing. When Bitcoin traded from 67,000 to 15,000 in the most recent bear market and downturn, Bitcoin just changed some hands. It was the fiat world. It's this whole, it's everything else that's volatile and in flux. TikTok next block, 900 coins a day, 450 coins a day. It's not changing.
Bitcoin is the absence of volatility.
It is. It's the only stable coin. It's the true stable coin.
Like you said the other night, Bitcoin is a mirror. And Bitcoin is just showing you the volatility of human action. I always like to put price numbers on it. Bitcoin going from 1 million to 20 million a coin. It's not Bitcoin being volatile. It's human action freaking out, realizing, oh shit, hang on a minute. Bitcoin going from 1 million to 20 million a coin is like 10 to 20 to 30 to 40% of the world's population all figuring out at once that Bitcoin is the only asset worth buying.
Well, and you said earlier there's $900 trillion in the world, or $250 billion in the world. There's not. There's 900 trillion or $250 billion worth of stuff. It's stuff that we're denominating the value in dollars, and Bitcoin is repricing all of that. And so really, if you want to know the value of Bitcoin, take $250 billion or divide that by 21 million. And I think we're getting there. It's the great demonetization. All the value in the world is going to be measured in Bitcoin.
And yeah, it's interesting. So going into like Bitcoin being a mirror, or this, this stable force that that forces you to recognize the chaos in the world. We were talking about that earlier, as like Bitcoin being this ultimate masculine energy in a world that's like gone chaotic feminine, right? It's here to restore order.
It is. It's we can all tether ourselves to this immovable. I think about it like an immovable object. It's like solid ground that you can stand on. Everything else is in flux. It's all variables. It's like a constant got introduced into a unsolvable mathematical equation with nothing but variables. You can actually solve for things economically now because you have an accurate measuring stick.
I I don't even want to go down my rabbit hole after you just put out that metaphysical, beautiful, beautiful analogy. But yeah, I think like Bitcoin, like for me personally, I think a lot of other people have had similar experiences. I'm not saying all Bitcoiners have noticed this, but when you found out that the government is taking away your manhood, your ability to provide through stealing 60% of your money a year, all of a sudden that made me say, hang on a minute, are there other things that the government is lying to me about and trying to feminize me for any specific gender they might have? And then all of a sudden I was down all sorts of other different rabbit holes of, the food industrial complex rabbit hole. And I found out very quickly that, eating the healthy traditional diet that our governments tell us is healthy for us doesn't make you a man. It makes you a female. It feminizes you, makes you fat, makes you lazy, makes you weak, makes you submissive. Is that what a government wants? Who knows? That's an answer the audience can answer for themselves. But for me personally, yes. So again, like the government telling you the healthiest thing to do in 2020 was to lock yourself in a cage, put a face diaper on your face to just keep germs locked in on your face for 12 hours a day and avoid sunlight and just take things that are proven not to be good. Like, I mean, that's just, it's objectively not good for a man. So to get back to your original question, like Bitcoin forces you to become the provider once again. It forces you to not trust, verifying every single aspect of your life. Taking care of your kids. I don't have kids yet, but Mr. Stacks over here does. Like looking into the food you eat, looking into how you should look after yourself, and just, the values you want to pass on to your kids. I think Bitcoin teaches you many things in many different aspects of your life, not just financially.
And going into that, right? So yeah, Bitcoin changes you. It forces you to like re-examine your life and the narratives that you've been told and live by, and come to face them, head on, and determine what's the truth for yourself. And that really transforms an individual, right? And so Bitcoin acts as this kind of like shelling point for that awakening. And then you have El Salvador here, which is a physical domain that starts to attract those individuals here. So my question is like, what does that do for El Salvador, where you got all these awakened, enlightened, motivated people who are ready to live a different life coming down here? What does that do for El Salvador in terms of like productivity and innovation and entrepreneurship?
I think it heavily incentivizes it. I mean, you're going to go, especially with Bitcoin, Bitcoin and humans now can go to where they can take their capital and their ingenuity to where it's treated best. And El Salvador has put out a very favorable set of rules, service provider fees, however you want to look at that. And I think as a result of that, you're going to bring in a lot of capital and a lot of people who are forward thinking, progressive individuals who are ethical, also who want to build and innovate and create abundance and fairness and prosperity. And I think El Salvador is going to benefit tremendously from that. I mean, it's this beacon of opportunity that is attracting people from all over the world. The traveling that I've done this year, one of the most common conversations that I've had about my travels with other people that I've run into globally is what's happening in El Salvador. Tell me about what's happening in El Salvador. What is it like down there? And so, yeah, it's getting a lot of attention. I was talking to my father today on the phone, and I was, I'm like, hey, so my wife and I are talking about relocating here, and He's like, and he's pretty adverse. I imagined he would be adverse to the concept. He's very, he has an affinity for Los Angeles. He's been there his whole life. And the first thing that came out of his mouth is he goes, the president down there is a savage. He's doing pretty amazing things, you know? And so people are figuring it out. It's like getting a lot of attention,
Yeah, I just think that the amount of quality people that are going to start making their way here, and then that kind of mix that happens, the randomness, the I guess the electrons bouncing off of each other is going to create a really synergistic force over here, and you're definitely going to see like a Cambrian explosion of ideas and innovation, and just another renaissance happening here. And I think that us four in this room are a testament of that already.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a vibrational thing. High vibes here. Yeah, not to get too metaphysical or woo woo, but it's creating like a manifestation feedback loop where you feel good and then you make good decisions. You feel abundant. You feel prosperous. You feel like there's opportunity. You're incentivized to go do things, and then you achieve things, and then you get to keep a large percentage of what you've done. It further incentivizes you to do more of that. And I think that it's like, yeah, I have a buddy, David, and he says we're spiraling upward forever, man. You know, and I really love that. And there's something deep behind that for me.
And this is the beautiful thing about having that geographical sovereignty. Like connecting with gentlemen like you in person, it's invigorating. And like the people who have changed my life the most, I think 95, maybe 98% of them I met outside of Australia. And just because it's very difficult to find like-minded people who, you know, who motivate you to really take things to the next level in your locality, in the 20-kilometer radius where you live in your hometown. Like, yeah, I mean, I could go down some different rabbit holes, but I think just having the ability to communicate with other people who are on board with everything you're doing in lots of different aspects of your life, not just with financial sovereignty, geographical sovereignty, entrepreneurial sovereignty. And it's like, it's a lighting a fire under your ass. It's a really good thing.
Nice.
I think that's a good closing off point there, huh?
Yeah.
It's getting late.
It's getting a little late. This
Getting quite
late. This was an epic rip, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe the amount of Bitcoin knowledge that this was spewed, and to have it.
This was the ultimate Bitcoin episode that we've done so far.
Yeah.
I would say.
You know what? I want to add one more thing if I can.
Sure, yeah.
You know, I've softened my anger towards what we could call the fiat world as I've deepened my understanding of why things became the way they are. You know, as Jeff Booth says, free markets are fundamentally deflationary. Prices fall to the marginal cost of production. And so the shouldification of everything that's taken place has been a result of the debasement of the currency, which has really been predicated upon not having a thermodynamically sound monetary instrument. Everything's leaking energy. So what that does is it creates a dynamic where you're incentivized to figure out how to protect some sector in the marketplace through building like a regulatory moat around your sector in the marketplace. Like, it's my understanding that 2 companies in the States have access to the patent or can produce insulin. So they can charge a lot of money for insulin. They can protect that margin because there's not any other competition. You know, they don't have any competitors. If you open source that patent, then a bunch of entrepreneurs and capital are going to flow into that sector. They're going to start producing insulin, and they're going to make it more abundant. The price is going to fall to the marginal cost of production. So we live in a fundamentally deflationary world, and having an inflationary monetary system encourages people to do unethical things. And so Bitcoin allows everyone on planet Earth to benefit from the fundamentally deflationary forces that we have in our world. And I think that the people through the game, I call it the game theoretic fuckness, and having essentially defective, leaky monetary instruments, and not having a thermodynamically sound vessel, not having an inviolable, unconfiscatable vessel, having a incentive to violence, because if I'm a sociopath and I don't give a fuck and I want what you have, I just kill you and I get it, right? So that tilts the incentive to violence. So that means the people who are running the world are essentially the best at perpetrating violence and being dishonest and being selfish and greedy and protecting their sector of the marketplace. And Bitcoin fundamentally inverts that. And so I've softened my anger or distaste towards the fiat paradigm because I think it's predicated upon not having a technological solution to It's like Satoshi fundamentally changed the fabric of our reality. Like we got an upgrade, an update in the simulation, and now the world operates differently. So part of my optimism, and I think part of what I speak to often that people seem to like is that I'm not angry anymore. I spent a lot of my life being angry about the way the world is. And through that lens, I think I understand how we got here. And now there's a solution and we're going in a different place. And so I would guess I would just say to anybody who's listening to this, you know, chill out. Like, we got this. We have the solution to these problems. Things are different. Satoshi changed the world. Like, it's a different world. The reason that we got here is predicated upon not having a solution. We have the solution and things are changing. So be pumped. Like, this is the greatest time to be alive ever.
Yeah, man. I do want to say something on that. I guess we'll close off there if everybody's ready to go. But dude, what you just said there is absolutely true. There needs to be much more positivity, and like that's why I came here to El Salvador, right? It's because, hey, there is a solution. Instead of being complaining all the time, let's be proactive and integrate with this technology and see what we can build up instead of like just, you know, being angry all the time.
And if you yell at Clown World, you're just strengthening it.
Mm-hmm.
Energy goes where attention, or energy flows where attention goes. Put your attention on something positive.
There's a dude, real quick one. There's a dude who studied all of the totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. So early 1920s Russia, late 1920s Russia, China, all of the communist collapses. The most effective way to actually end those collapses, the quickest way, is to simply build a parallel system that makes that system obsolete. That's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow.
Satoshi
Beautiful.
bailed us out. Biggest bailout in all of human history.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Well, that was a fantastic rip. Dude, Luke, Eric, thank you so much for blessing us with your presence over here at Sovereignty Studios. I can't tell you how grateful we are and how much knowledge I just absorbed. So
Still
thank you, gents.
gonna take a few days to process a little.
Thank you guys. It's an honor.
Thanks for the energy. I mean, it's 10:30 and I'm absolutely buzzing. So
Yeah,
No, I
Thank
wanted
you
to
already.
go, but
Yeah.
we got things to do too.
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having us,
guys.
gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you.
Peace.
See everyone.
Peace.